Hello, and welcome to another episode of Advanced Programming in Python. Things that you can do with Python and oatmeal. Well, maybe not so much oatmeal. Um, I hope everyone is doing well. Things are progressing. I thought I'd create this short little video to help you along here. Um, we had 2 weeks working with the database unit. A little tricky, but I think you figured it out. If not, please let me know. This week we are working on unit testing, Unit 5, right here, unit testing. Um, Unit testing is a vital important to programming. You have to do programmers, developers with code always do any kind of testing, making sure that your program works, and you try to isolate issues, any concerns, things of that nature. Unit testing kind of just breaks it down even smaller into a small unit of code. Lots of times, as a programmer or developer, you're working on a whole bunch of different pieces of code, and you like to test certain pieces of it maybe separately and then hopefully all together to make sure everything works together. So the units are working, and then when you put it all together, like making a cake, everything works together and you've got a nice cake, for example, or cookies or whatever you're making. I don't really bake much, but that's still an analogy I can think of. Um, there's a couple of videos here. We're going to focus on what's called unit testing, which is a built-in module in Python, and also Pytest, which is another popular one. I've got a bunch of links in here. There's a tutorial that will take you through some of this stuff, but I'm also going to show you a couple of things just so you have a kind of a head start on what it is. So if you've never done it, most of the time when you do any kind of programming, if I'm in Spider, if I do any kind of programming, you can see my code here. Um, you're always doing some type of testing and debugging, those types of things. But what unit test, the built-in modules do, and Pytest do, they kind of help you along with that process. Um, it can be very simple, but or it'll also become very sophisticated. So we're going to kind of get it and show you some basics of it. So you've got a lot of prep here, information like videos, like I said, unit testing is a PDF, a lot of good information, a lot of good documentation. Just like the other units, we've got a quiz. And then we've got our unit testing. We've got the PDF, which has more details in there. My spacing is a little off here. I apologize for that. You're going to create two programs. One will be focused on unit testing, and one will be focused on the Pytest. And I'm just going to walk you through some of this. Just as a little background, and as you read through this, you'll have a better idea. Unit testing has a bit more to it. You've got to set up stuff a little bit differently, structure differently. So actually, let me show you that code. I'm in unit test here, and I created some simple little functions here to do some testing, and you're going to see some of this, and hopefully. So one thing is you import unit test. That's the built-in library. In this case, I'm importing math because I'm going to do some math functions, but that has nothing to do with unit test. That's just for our own testing purposes. Unit test also requires you to create a class. You create the class just like something like this. You can call this whatever you want. Usually put test or testing in there, and then it's unit test dot test case. Then you've got your functions within this class all set up. As you can see, they're all indented here. All my functions are indented here. And then you're going to run the test. So you create a unit test dot main, and it will actually run the test. It'll run those tests. This is a very basic structure set up. What I'm doing in this case, as you can see, is I've got three functions. I've got a square root function, I've got a square function, and testing for equality. Again, I put tests in front of each one of them because this will also help us when we do the Pytest. But it just kind of reminds you of that. So as you can see, what I did was, let's just start the first one. I create a definition, I assign a value, num is equal to 25, and then I use what's called the assert. The assert is a method that we can use for this process. So what the assert does is it checks whether or not a condition is true. So in this case, I'm going to say, hey, use the math function, take the square root of whatever I'm passing a num of 25 is equal 5. Here I'm taking num, right, 7 times 7, and I'm going to assert that that value is equal to 40, and then bound at equality. So let's run this. I will run this here. and you're going to see a whole bunch of things come out. So I'm going to widen my screen. At the bottom, you'll see right away, you'll see failed. I've got 3 errors. It ran 3 tests. It's going to show you what's going on. It's going to try each test. And interesting enough, it shouldn't. I wonder why it failed 3 tests here. So hold on a second. Okay. The idea with this is I want to show you is it should give you errors if there's an issue. For example, uh, 10 does not equal 11, so that's going to fail. Num times num, so num is 7 is 40. So you get that idea. Here's another one, another unit test. This one's with strings I want to show you. Let me clear this, clear the console. Um, you can see I've got 3 different tests going on here. This is all unit test again. And I'm going to run this one. And it's just going to give me no printouts, nothing. It's just say ran 3 tests in 0.003 seconds and everything's okay. Notice down here, I'm going to play with this one for 1 second. It says assert true, and it's comparing short hair dot is upper. So I think what I was going to do is just do something like this. I think I messed that up. Let's see here. Let me run this again. Yeah. So now I just played with the text to make it fail, and then you get a failure of 1. Failure is not true. I mean, this is kind of a goofy one, but it's so again, it gives you ways to test different things, different values. This is the assert test. This one is also here. I'll put this back. You can go back and look at this one. TTP. So what this does is takes the string TTP, multiplies it 5 times, and you get that. If I just change this, let's do this again. Let me run this so I get no failures. Everything is hunky-dory. Let's change this to say 4 times instead of, because you can see this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Let's run it again. And now I should get an error. And it's going to say these don't match. And you can see these don't match. Kind of tells you failure of 1. If I go back and I say, oh, okay, oops, something like that, play with my code, and now it fixed it. Again, it's a simple way to do some testing like that. Hopefully that makes sense. The other one, now you notice I've got a lot of stuff going on here. I've got these unit tests, I've got these class information, all this stuff. With PyTest, which I'm going to pull over here, it's a lot different. I'm going to use this for PyTest. I'm going to take the same kind of thing and do PyTest, but look at this. I strip out everything. It's just pretty much, I'm using the math library because I am, and then it's just the actual functions. That's it. I don't need any of this other stuff. I don't need the unit test. I don't need this class setup. I don't need to do run main. I don't need any of that stuff. So PyTest is kind of nice that way to run that. So what I'm going to do is let me clear this. Now the difference is you don't run it in here as you normally, like I just did. You don't run PyTest in here. What you need to do is you need to open up the console. And you open up and you go to, like I'm in Anaconda, and you go to your command prompt. And you open it up there. I've already got mine open over here. And here's here's another little trick just so we don't throw you off. So you'll notice my file is located over here. I'm going to move this out of the way again really quick. I've got mine in a directory called Advanced Programming Solutions Test Square. Let's see. Oh no, I took this program and I copied it to a separate directory. So what you got to do, this is the way you do it. This is the way I did it. I've got all my code, my Python code, in a directory called Develop Python. That's just how I have mine structured. And then in here, I create a directory called PyTest. Now I can put anything in here that I want to test using PyTest. So that's how I did it. The trick is what happens is whenever you put anything in here and you run the PyTest, it's going to test everything. So right now I just want to test one program. I don't want to test everything. And this is the program test_square.py. So I have the test name in there. So I specifically put that in there. It's the same exact code. It's just in a separate subdirectory. Okay. And then the reason I'm showing you this is that's where I moved it. Is I go over here to my command prompt, and here I am in Python PyTest. If you want to see where I am, that's where I am. This is kind of the old school way of looking at stuff. These are all my programs. These are all my programs. Same thing, right? That's the GUI. So PyTest. You don't have to remember how to do all this stuff. This is a way to cheat and do it. Here, I'll show you really quick. go to Python, Pytest, I create it. You can do a couple things. Let's do this. I'm going to open up my Anaconda, open up my command prompt. There's my command prompt, right? So I'm right there. I want to get to this directory. So I'm going to highlight it, Control C. I'm going to come here. I'm going to say CD to change directory, space, and then I'm going to right click, and it'll just paste that whole path in there, and then enter. And it puts it right there. If I type dir for directory, it will then just display that one file, test_square. I know, a little bit of a rigmarole. But that's all you gotta do. You just have to go to that one directory and set that up like that. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna CLS clears the screen just to make it so it looks pretty. And then all you do is type pytest, Pytest, just like that. And it takes whatever file you have in there. Now you notice I've got 3 functions in there. You notice it also created some extra files, the cache file and all that when I ran it. Now this is what the output was. You can see that. It goes through, it checks, I ran pytest, collect 3 items, and it checks and it's got these codes. So testing those, you get an error. So I got an assertion error there, I got an error there, okay? So it tells me what my errors are. Kind of goes through all that. So it's another way, another method. This one, and this you could throw off to a log file or like this, and I could, it's nice. Or I could capture it for later and just do some basic testing with it. Not that you can't do that also with the other one, but it's just another way of testing. Pytest, I think, is a little bit more simplistic. It's a little bit more popular. Doesn't mean it's better necessarily, but that's another way of doing it. That is the idea of what you're going to do for here, for what we're doing here. I've got some other documentation in here about unit testing. There's a PDF here about what unit testing is, and it kind of takes you through some of this stuff, walks you through all this, kind of what I had here. So take a look at that documentation when you get a chance to. And then in your assignment, unit testing assignment, sorry, I had it open. Oh, I do have it open. Here it is. You're going to create a unit test module, and you're going to create three functions similar to what you just did. You kind of create these functions for using unit testing, go through that. And this is kind of my output here that I did to show you that. You should receive the errors, and then I want you to fix them, and then rerun it, and hopefully you run it and you don't get the errors anymore. And then you're going to take the same files with the errors, and you're going to do the same thing and use Pytest. And just remember, with Pytest, you'll have to remove a lot of the other code. So you can use the basis, the structure of it, but you want to do all that stuff. So hopefully that all makes sense. You're going to use Unittest and Pytest to do all this stuff for testing. Okay. And again, it's all in this PDF here as well. So hopefully that all makes sense. Like I said, there's a lot of good information in here. These PDFs and this tutorial kind of takes you through some of those processes in addition to what I did. So good luck, and I hope you all have a great week.